Hello and welcome. Now it's been a while since my last video, and as you can see, quite a lot has changed. In particular, I got my motorcycle license and started riding a motorbike. And really, the whole reason that I got into motorbiking is so that I can do these kinds of bikepacking trips, but cover much larger distances and within a much shorter amount of time, and without as much, shall we say, suffering as a bikepacking trip on a bicycle. Although, of course, that is part of the fun of a bikepacking trip. Now, I decided to go for a approximately 3-week long trip on my motorbike. So starting from where I live in Sydney, and I traveled through parts of southeastern Australia. By the way, I definitely still have plans to go bikepacking with a bicycle, so keep an eye out for that in the future. But without further ado, let's begin. Day 1, I headed west from Sydney through to the Blue Mountains by the Great Western Highway, and I made it all the way to Bathurst, and it was a pretty uneventful day, apart from a bit of rain at the end. The next morning it was still raining, but the goal was to go through Orange and then head to Dubbo. Now, unfortunately, on the way between Orange and Dubbo, I had a bit of a crash due to some gravel on the road as I was turning off. The fairing on the right side got quite damaged, and the bracket holding the additional headlamp on the right side also got quite damaged. But that was never working in the first place, so that was not my main concern. The biggest problem, however, was that the fairings were bent in such a way that when you turn the handlebar to the right, the forks would actually scrape against part of the fairing. I tried to remove the fairing to see if I could fix the problem, which I was not able to fix. And then I couldn't work out how to put the fairing back on. So the next morning I ended up zip tying the fairing to the crash bar, and I limped my way to Robertson's Motorcycles and Machinery in Dubbo. And they were very, very kind to help me sort out a temporary solution. So we ended up just cutting away that bit of fairing that was scraping against the fork. And I'm very, very grateful for them for helping me out. Anyway, with that sorted out, and with me having arrived in Dubbo, I wanted to start heading west. And the plan was to go to the little town of Nyngan. The highway out west from Dubbo is extremely flat and straight, and it's like this for about 1,000 kilometers all the way to Broken Hill. And the scenery is just the vast expanse of the Australian outback. There's pretty much nothing to see, really. After a very long and boring stretch of the highway, I did manage to make it to the town of Ningen without any issues, really. There was a free campground in Ningen by the river, which I decided to go to, and I followed my Garmin there, and unfortunately, you know, you can never trust these Garmin things. It took me down a very wet dirt road, and after riding on that for even just like 100 meters, my bike was completely caked with this mud-like stuff. And it wasn't even the right way, so I had to go back the way that I came from. But eventually I did find the campsite, and it was quite a nice place actually. So I just set up camp here last night. We're next to the town of Ningen, and we're just right by the water. I then headed into the town center. I saw the big bogan, which is pretty funny. And what's even more interesting is that the river that flows through Ningen is called the Bogan River. There's some interesting history around as well. This so-called wool wagon was used to transport wool around back in the day, in the 1860s, and it was pulled by a number of horses. This helicopter was donated to Ningen to commemorate the evacuation of the residents during a flood in 1990. The symbolism here being, of course, that helicopters were used to airlift the residents out of the town. With my short tour of Ningen complete, I headed back onto the highway and continued going west. After 130 kilometers, I made it to Kobar. Kobar is a mining town, most predominantly known for its copper mines, but there is also a bit of gold mining. I'm on my way here to check out a lookout on Fort Burke Hill. So this lookout offers a really breathtaking view into a massive open pit that marks the entrance to the series of gold mines below. At this point, it was about lunchtime, and I had considered continuing to go west. So the next town would be Wilcanio, which is about 260 kilometers west of Kobar. A number of people actually advised me against staying in Wilcanio. I was told it was quite a dangerous place to be, so just to be safe, I decided not to spend a night in Wilcanio, and instead to look for accommodation in Kobar. The cheapest place I found was the Kobar Miners Lodge, which was a really interesting place. It's like a lodge that's designed specifically for miners and contractors that work in the area. It was the cheapest place by far, but it was still $120 for the night. But it was quite a nice place, so apart from being a bit small, I was quite happy. So after 4 days on the road, I had travelled over 700 kilometers and I was well and truly in the outback.